Welcome back, everyone. This is the Burgundy and Gold Review podcast for the last time of the 2021-2022 NFL season. The season has concluded. Washington has finished at 7-10, and we are going to be recapping how things went, where our thoughts stand, what our thoughts are with Washington heading into a very, very crucial 2022 offseason. I'm your co-host, Jess of HGTR.Nation, joined by Sam of WSH Football 365. We got a lot to unpack with kind of how things went and how our view of the team either changed or stayed the same throughout the season. But Sam, how are we doing today?
I'm feeling pretty relieved that the season's over, honestly. We learned a lot this year, learned about Taylor Heinicke's durability, learned extensively about the depth of the team. But it was a roller coaster season, very tumultuous, with a lot of things on and off the field that added to the disarray of a normal Washington football season. So as we head into the offseason, just sit back and kind of clear our minds and evaluate how the team is going to look moving forward.
The biggest theme of the season that I have taken away is you're irrelevant if you don't have a quarterback. Quarterback controversies, rotating starters have been injuries, what have it, have been a storyline in Washington for as long as I can remember. Yet another season where Washington had more than 3 quarterbacks play in the year. That was a big thing we talked about starting the season. We were saying the big thing with Fitzpatrick that we were hoping for was at least have one guy just start the season, and you at least can have the consistency of him starting. That was not the case. Fitzpatrick started. Taylor Heinicke started, of course. Garrett Gilbert got a start, and Kyle Allen even got some action, whether it be being benched or injuries from Heinicke. But so that's an issue, and I think that's the biggest thing that Washington has to address going into this year is get a guy that is going to be that guy for the entire season, whether it be a rookie or a veteran.
Yeah, and not to quote Bruce Allen, but when he said the team was close, back, however long ago it was, like that clearly was bull crap. But, I can honestly say this team is, and if they had a quarterback, and it's nothing to take away from Taylor Heinicke, but like you said, like we learned what Taylor Heinicke really is. I'm glad that he got this body of work over the season. I'm not happy to see Fitzpatrick injured, obviously, but it did give this opportunity to shut down, like, hey, is Taylor Heinicke the guy? Like, we know definitively now that he's not. He's a bona fide QB2. He just doesn't have the arm to make the throws. And moving forward, Washington has a great roster right now. It's not the best roster in the NFL. When I say great roster, they have a lot of very good building blocks. They have a lot of very good pieces that I think is going to look even better after they get through this next wave of free agency in the draft. And they need to bring a quarterback in there because that whole team's not going to be able to stick around like this forever, especially the defensive line, which we all know the potential of. So heading into the offseason, and I think it's a glaring, obvious thing that they have to go out and find a quarterback. And allude to last year, they went out after Matt Stafford, didn't want to match the offer of 2 first-round picks and a starting quarterback. The Rams obviously outbid them, but I think this year you might see them getting a little bit more aggressive. Guys like Russell Wilson, possibly Aaron Rodgers on the market. So we'll just have to see, but they have to make that 100% top priority.
Somewhere in an alternate universe, Matt Stafford is suiting up for his first playoff game with Washington and throwing to Amari Cooper and Terry McLaurin. But alas, unfortunately, that is not our reality. And that was a big thing the Taylor Heinicke getting to start for the majority of the season, going into the season. Remember, there's a little bit of a QB controversy, at least amongst the fan base, of Heinicke versus Fitzpatrick, even though the coaching staff was really, really firm in Fitzpatrick being the guy. Heinicke got his sample size. You said it best. He's a guy you want on your roster. He's a competitor. His teammates love him. He brings a spark. He brings the energy that you haven't really felt at the QB position in a while. But he is not the guy that's going to get you to the playoffs. He's not the guy you're going to win meaningful playoff games with. He can be QB2 on my team any day, but they need to address quarterback, whether it be trade, draft, preferably not free agency with the bad options there. Won't get too much right now into the kind of guys that the team could go after there. But, I think another one of the big things, storylines coming into the year, was the team is going to get carried by an elite defense, and the offense would be just good enough to get them over the hump or at least improve from last year. That defense, We talked about them in game recaps. They were anything but elite, I'll say. And, you can make things saying the D-line wasn't getting utilized properly for the first half of the season. They had injuries, in the secondary. There was miscommunication stuff with guys getting in there. Linebacker still a glaring weakness. They didn't get the production out of Jamin Davis they wanted. There were injuries with Chase Young, Montez Sweat, some personal issues, some COVID issues, some injury issues. But regardless, I think the defense, without a doubt, underperformed this season. They had a bottom 5 secondary. They have, it's frustrating because they have many first-round picks. 5 of their last first-round picks are invested into the defense since 2017. They have many big free agent money wrapped up in there. They've got, still solid guys like Cole Holcomb, or other examples of guys who aren't big money free agents and aren't high draft picks that are still good producers. And it's kind of, where does it all go wrong? Because you feel like you have a great coordinator, you have a lot of talent on defense, but they're not a good defense.
You saw Washington and the defense inexplicably, it seemed, get better whenever Chase Young and Montez Sweat exited, and you saw more James Smith-Williams and Casey Toohill. There's been a lot of rumors coming out of the locker room that maybe these guys are freelancing too much. They got a little bit too caught up in the hype. I mean, we got to remember these guys are, I believe, both under the age of 25 years old. Montez Sweat, don't quote me, but they're young, and I think sometimes I forget that, and you get hyped up in the NFL. But that like brings me to the question. Rivera said that at first, as soon as the season ended, there would be no changes to the coaching staff, and a couple days later, when he did his his end of the year press conference, he said he's not going to speak on if there's going to be any changes. I found that significant. He could also just be saying that because he already said that he wasn't going to change anything, but it begs the question, and there's been some rumors over whether Sam Mills, the defensive line coach, should be moved on from. JP Finley brought up a good point that there's alphas all in that room: John Allen, Deron Payne, Montez Sweat, Chase Young, and when you have 4 big personalities like that, even Matt Ioannidis, like when you have big personalities all like that in the same room, I think it takes a certain person to be able to cultivate the best type of cohesiveness that you can from 5 guys that are elite level mentality. So I wonder if maybe something needs to be changed, or modified a little bit internally. I don't think Jack Del Rio needs to go yet, but it's definitely not a direction that we were expecting. I didn't think the expectations that was getting from, most of Washington's fan base was actually what we were going to see, given that the sample size last year was against lesser quarterbacks and injured teams. But I didn't expect it to be as bad as it was for as long as it was. And at times it was just downright embarrassing. So something big's got to change this offseason and get that unit together, get the maturity and the fundamentals, get back to just playing fundamental football, and I think they'll be okay.
You can definitely say the team bought into their own hype when we got quotes coming out in the offseason about Chase Young and Montez Sweat wanting to break the single-season sack record for pass rushing or edge rushing teammates, should I say. Obviously, that's, a goal you can only set for yourself. You want to have things to strive for, but just it's kind of embarrassing when that's what's getting said in the offseason. That record's 39 sacks between 2 teammates, and Chase Young and Montez Sweat finished 33 and a half short of it. 33 and a half short of the 39 sacks required, or 40 sacks required for the record. They combined for 6.5 sacks this year. Obviously, Chase Young and both of them probably missed about a season's worth of time combined, but just very disappointing from them. Jonathan Allen had a phenomenal season, that defensive line. Deron Payne, although he didn't have as many eye-popping plays as Allen, still had a really good season. Don't let his skirmish with Allen on the sideline really look over that. But I don't know. It didn't seem like we got a lot out of Matt Ioannidis either. Tim Sell didn't record a single sack this season. So D-line, I think if you want to look at the defense as a whole underperforming, you start with the trenches and you start with the defensive line, where all the investment, all the talent is in the defense for the most part. And I mean, even though you had some good players, it wasn't a great group. I mean, we had a solid run defense, but pass rush just didn't really feel like it was there unless it was against. I think the 2 best pass rushing games for our defensive line came against the Giants this season.
Giants, and I think the Tampa game, they got pretty decent pressure on Brady. I think they only had 1 sack that game, but they gave him a lot of hurries, which it forced a couple turnovers. But yeah, it's it's hard to quantify why that's happening when you have the amount of talent that they do on the field, the first round investments, contract investments, yada yada yada. But like I said earlier, if it's whether it's been an internal thing, with the defensive line coach, whether it's a scheme thing with Jack Del Rio, whether it's a maturity and drive thing, with in the heads of the young players, or a combination of all three, they're gonna have to figure something out. Because I think Rivera, getting into my next point, and to kind of go down the list of defensive issues, eh, Rivera, I think, went into the season thinking the defensive line was so good it would make up for this lack of talent on the second level of the linebacker group. And it's proven very early on that Jamin Davis was not the guy that they thought when they drafted him, or he has very far, and he's not close to what they want him to be yet. He's already going to be moving from what they thought was a Mike linebacker to an outside linebacker position. So that's not something you really want to see. But lack of talent at linebacker definitely was a glaring hole this year. Something that Ron Rivera had his pretty much entire tenure in Carolina was Luke Kuechly, and that really stud middle linebacker that was a quarterback of that defense, and that was really missing this year. And we were very not big fans of Bostic due to his play, but when he went out, like, he was the signal caller of that defense, that made a big difference. And that's something that they're going to have to find moving forward. I think after quarterback, that's probably the second most important thing for this team, is finding a true quarterback of your defense at Mike linebacker.
Middle linebacker for sure. You make a really good point there. Bostic, he was not really having great play, but it's not just about the play, it's about the communication that comes with that, and that was never really replaced throughout the season. Jamin Davis, he just kind of ebbed and flowed with where the team played him, how many snaps he got. Some games he, was a healthy scratch. Some game, Dallas game, second one where he got absolutely railed, he was a healthy scratch. Other times he was playing like 5 snaps. Other times he was playing the whole game. So they were still really much trying to figure him out. Cole Holcomb had a pretty solid season, but you want more at that linebacker position. Kind of looking on to the secondary, there's not many people who are going to be getting replaced. I feel like we're going to have a very similar secondary next year. Whether or not the team moves on from Landon Collins, we'll see. I think it'd be better to move on for him, because I think even once his position got changed, the advanced stats are very telling about how he is in pass coverage. He had the most missed tackles on the team. He had the highest missed tackles percentage on the team for the minimum amount of required tackles for that stat. And he had the worst passer rating allowed on the team for players playing as much as he did, for the starters, should I say. So I think it'd be smart to move on from him, at least save some good money there, since now is the first year you can really get out of his contract. William Jackson will return. Kendall Fuller will be back. They're probably going to bring back Bobby McCain. Cam Curl is going to have another year. St. Juste will be back. So I think we'll have a very, very similar secondary to what we had to start the year. So hopefully you get a lot more, because the secondary did get a little bit better as the year went on. They never really were great at any stretch, but they were terrible to start the year. I think a lot of that was misuse with the new players. McCain was there. Collins was back, Jackson was there, and it wasn't really the secondary that you had to close the year in 2020 that was really strong. That was like Jeremy Reeves, that was Cameron Curl, that was Kendall Fuller, that was Ronald Darby. And so that group saw a lot of overhaul. So I think that explained a lot of the miscommunication, a lot of the bad play we got to start the year. But they still just didn't really find their footing for the amount of money and talent that they had back there. So I'm hoping that another offseason of the continuity of the same secondary staff, the same defensive scheme, the same players for the most part will be very beneficial to them starting out a bit better. But you really want more out of those guys, because, Curl was undoubtedly probably the best there, but William Jackson was a bit disappointing. Kendall Fuller, was good, but he wasn't as great as he was in stretches last season. And you just kind of missed the cohesiveness that previous year's group had.
Yeah, it's kind of like the D line. The investment isn't. We're not getting the return based upon the investment that's there. I do think more so than the defensive line, it is definitely like just a new guy cohesiveness issue, as you said. Needs some more time to gel. You could definitely see William Jackson, and he even said it himself, like he just wasn't really comfortable in the scheme until more than halfway through the year. And, that happens with players. Unfortunately, things don't happen as fast as we want them to as fans, and a lot of times we don't realize because we're not out there coaching the guys, we're not out there running the plays. It's a very secondary heavy draft this year. And not to get like too heavy into draft talk, but guys like Kyle Hampton, safety from Notre Dame. This is like a top 5 prospect, could end up falling at 11. Stingley. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed. I love the investment that they have there. Kyle or Fuller is someone to me that I like him a lot, but I still think that we are thinking it's like 2016 Fuller, 2017 when he was like the best slot corner in the league. And honestly, like he just hasn't played like that ever since that year. He's been solid, but I think that he's kind of hyped up in our minds a little bit. And I wouldn't mind adding an elite talent to that secondary, like if they had the opportunity to. Because you really don't know what's going to be happening with St. Juste with his. It's not good to see a rookie go on IR for concussions ever, or anyone for that matter. So you really don't know, where they're going to go with that. They're definitely going to need to draft some depth. But yeah, it's another underwhelming subcategory of our defense was the secondary, without a doubt.
Looking at the offensive side of the ball, we talked about quarterback, kind of really needing to address a guy there. But yet again, third year in Terry McLaurin's career, third year where he's the only real offensive weapon we have in the passing game. Curtis Samuel investment talk. I mean, not to say his whole career in Washington will be this way, but for the 2021 season, talk about a freaking dud. I mean, we can talk about the disappointment of Jamin Davis, can talk about how William Jackson only played really good for about a stretch of the season, but at least those guys were playing and they were out there. And Curtis Samuel can obviously recover from his hamstring or his groin, both of them actually, is what he dealt with. But he just wasn't out there. And when he wasn't Curtis Samuel. He finished with 7 total touches for less than 50 total yards for $11 million in 5 games where he only started one of them and was on a snap count for 3 other ones and was active but didn't actually play for the 5th. So, I mean, I don't know how the team wants to move forward. Not necessarily getting rid of him this year, but do you move forward expecting him to be a big contributor, or do you still just need more at the position until he can actually prove that he is a contributor?
Getting into it first and foremost, the coaching staff definitely dropped the ball with handling Curtis Samuel this year. He should have been placed on IR way earlier when he re-aggravated the injury. Instead of throwing him out there on a snap count, I felt like the team was more concerned about the perception of the fan base. And, I mean, who knows who else was pressuring them to get that investment on the field. If a guy needs to sit around and get healthy, he needs to sit around and get healthy. I find it hard to call someone a bust until they've actually had the opportunity to be on the field, but you still don't want to pay somebody $11 million and have them say at the end of the year, after the season's over, I'm the healthiest I've felt all year. That's absolutely no help to the team. And I don't think he said that to like be condescending, but like we could have used him this year and it could have been the difference in some games possibly. First and foremost, when they go forward with investment in the position, if they need to invest more, you can always invest more in offensive firepower, but I don't think that's going to happen until they extend Terry McLaurin. I don't think. Let me rephrase that. They could still choose to extend Terry in the springtime, which has been historically when Washington extends their star players. I'd like to see it happen sooner. Could happen sooner. I don't know when it is going to be, but it's the same things. It remains. Terry is going to get that money. I don't see them going out and getting a guy like Allen Robinson. I don't see them going out and spending big on anyone else. Considering they just gave $11 million a year to Curtis Samuel last year, they still have to pay Terry, who's going to get $20 million, however much a year. You have a 3rd-round pick invested in Dyami Brown. Cam Sims is leaving. I would hope they would try to get Cam Sims back. I feel like he's underutilized every single year and is a red zone target. Every time they call on him, he makes a play. But I could see them, in the back end of the draft or in the middle of the draft, maybe getting somebody off the mid-tier free agent market, like a DJ Chark or something like that. But I don't think it's going to be anything crazy. I don't think we're going to see Calvin Ridley here. I don't think we're going to see Allen Robinson. Just to put that out there right now. But it also like you got to have a quarterback, man. Like we can't really evaluate any wide receiver group properly until they have somebody that can actually throw them the ball, and they haven't. So it's still kind of convoluted.
I think that's definitely fair. You can look at it going into 2022, saying we got Terry coming back, hopefully locked up long term by then. You have a hopefully healthy Curtis Samuel, and you hopefully will have Dyami Brown take a next step. But for me, I'm more of that line of thought where it's like, if you can get more firepower on offense, then do so, because and obviously they need a QB first and foremost. It won't matter if they don't have a quarterback who can't get in the ball consistently and allow the playmakers to make plays. But I don't know. I just so far I haven't seen anything from Curtis Samuel or Dyami Brown, and I was excited for both coming into the season, but I haven't seen anything so far to make me say that I can forego investing more talent on offense for the sake of hoping these guys develop. I think you can have a scenario where you can pay Terry, you can get somebody in free agency, not necessarily, top of the market kind of guy. You just add somebody else in free agency who you can expect to make an impact, add somebody else in the draft, either or maybe, and then still hope to get production out of Brown and still hope to get production out of Samuel. I just really they really need some more juice there. I feel like I guess I'm a Scott Turner apologist in this way. I don't think he's, a world beater. I don't think Washington is sitting on the next offensive genius who is getting held back here. But it's hard to evaluate, an offense with a depleted group every season, it feels like, and a quarterback who can't throw the ball. So I'm just of the mindset, get as much talent on offense as you can, plug in the holes on defense, if the opportunity arises. But the defense, I think, showed that they could figure. I mean, they're going to obviously address some areas on defense, no matter what in this season, whether it be some free agent signing, some draft pick. No way, they just go all offensive heavy. But right now, I think where the roster is at and how much is invested into this team, I think offense has to be the priority going into the year. And I think that's a good thing because they don't even really need to invest in the offensive line that much. We essentially, assuming Sheriff is gone, we have our 5 starters on the offensive line. We have guys that we like at tight end, not to say we can't have more, but Logan Thomas is still going to be that guy. John Bates didn't have a reception until like the 10th game of the year, and he finished with the top 10 yards per reception for tight ends and finished with almost 300 receiving yards for a tight end, which is pretty good. So Bates is going to be back. Maybe they bring back Ricky Seals-Jones, who stepped up in moments when Thomas was out. So I think that really only leaves wide receivers and running backs that you can invest some more in. And I think until you actually are definitive and that you don't need more those positions, then you can't go in not wanting to address those things. I think the defense can figure itself out with whatever communicate. Defense is more about situation. I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, but defense is more about, I feel like, situational aspect. Defense is the thing that's a lot more fluid year in and year out. If you have consistent talent on offense, you're always going to have a good offense. We see defensive groups overachieve, underachieve, live up to the hype, not live up to the hype every season, every year. And a lot of that is just dependent on what situations the defense find them in. There are so many moving variables there. But with offensive talent, those groups are always that good every season. And I want Washington to have that kind of group that they had back in 2015 and 2016, where the offense was the cream of the crop and we had a putrid defense. We're not saying we don't want a putrid defense, but saying like they need offensive talent. That's the whole point. They need offensive talent.
Yeah, and I honestly like in the beginning of the year, I think both you and I predicted a regression by Gibson. What in terms of stats, and in terms of touchdowns, we were right on the touchdowns. Yards wise, he improved. One of, I think, 6 or 7,000 yard rushers in the NFL. It's pretty significant. But the fumbling issue is a big deal. He seems to have a durability issue as well. We saw what a body of work will do to Antonio Gibson over the course of a season. And not to say that he didn't handle it well, he did, but he put the ball on the ground too many times. You have J.D. McKissic, who's a free agent. They're already in talks with him. He wants to be here. They want him here. I fully expect him to be back, and I expect, I wouldn't be shocked if that news was sooner rather than later, before free agency starts, meaning. I do think that they could add another running back, another veteran running back, or another rookie running back there to, kind of spell Antonio Gibson. Jarrett Patterson's proven that he can handle a pretty good load. It was my my preseason stud, and he turned out to be a pretty darn good roster piece throughout the course of the season. Uh, I think that he's good and situational, but like, I still think they could add a guy like hear me out, like Melvin Gordon, or like somebody that's actually dynamic, like that can have as much threat as Antonio Gibson does when he's on the field, and maybe spell Antonio Gibson every now and then when he needs it. It's this team starts it's this team plays the best when it's running the damn ball, and getting another running back there could really help open things up for them, I think.
I 110% agree that they need to address the running back position, not just by bringing back J.D. McKissic, but adding somebody in the draft or free agency. I'd actually say that Antonio Gibson regressed in all aspects this year. Obviously, he had more yards in terms of it was 1,000. I think he was sixth in the NFL in rushing yards with 1,037, if I remember correctly. So more yards than last season. But he played 16 games this year, had a little over 1,000 yards, and last year he played 10 or 11 or 12 games and had 900 yards. Fumbling was much more of an issue. I think his yards per carry went down too. So, and we haven't really seen Antonio. We saw it the most in week 1, him utilized in the passing game, and then he had like a really long touchdown against Buffalo, and that was it for Antonio Gibson in the passing game essentially. So I don't know where things. He's a good guy. You want him getting a. We saw against New York, had a great game. You can have these great moments. Not saying get rid of Antonio Gibson, not at all. But fumbling was a big issue, and for health purposes, keeping him more fresh, you got to get somebody else in here to spell him. Antonio Gibson's your power back to me. I'd like somebody that has a bit more explosion, a bit more speed, a bit more juice to him, which is weird because Gibson's a 4.3 guy or a 4.4 guy speed wise. And he's become, I think, the added weight and the transition to running back has kind of affected that burst and explosion we saw with him as a wide receiver who is just getting running back carries at Memphis as opposed to now being a full-time running back. He's had a bit more injuries. He's a bit more heavy-footed, should I say. Not as much quick twitch or burst that you really want. So I'd really like them to add somebody like that can just take one. It's a very cliche phrase, take one to the house, but just somebody that's got a bit more juice to him. McKissic, I'd kind of like to keep him solely as like that pass blocking, receiving kind of guy. Patterson, nice to keep as a 4th running back. Not sure if he's really going to develop into like someone you really want a substantial workload in the offense, but not sure if I prefer that in the draft or free agency. But something like what the Patriots have, with Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. Neither of those guys is a star, but both of them contribute to a great running game that really is the backbone of their offense. So I'd like to see him do something with the running back position on top of bringing back McKissic and keeping Gibson healthy, because I think it'd be a lot more beneficial to Gibson to get him somebody who he can split reps with, as opposed to somebody that you can rather be an 80-20 split of running or what have it.
Do you remember, like, probably last March, I came out with my first mock draft, or I was about to, and I had us taking Najee Harris at 16. And then I was like, people are going to be mad. So I changed it. I'd still take Najee Harris at 16.
Najee Harris.
Over Jamin Davis.
Well, he wasn't the most efficient running back this year. I think that's similar reasons to why Antonio Gibson has not been the most efficient. These guys, when you're relying on them to just absolutely carry your offense, you're not going to see the highest efficiency. Gibson, I think the biggest tell of a running back is yards per carry, and Gibson has a slightly below average yards per carry at about 4 flat. So, I mean, he had plenty of games where he had like 15, 20, 30 yards as his final box score. So looking back at it now, how Jamin Davis played, I don't think it's the craziest thing to say. I'd rather have drafted Najee Harris.
Yeah, man, he's a stud. He's a stud. But Washington going, not to rag on the team too much. Like I said earlier in the episode, they do have a lot of really good talent. They have a lot of good building blocks going forward, and Rivera has a lot of money and draft picks at his disposal to make some things happen in this crucial upcoming 3rd season that will probably define his legacy in Washington. I think we're going to see a lot of activity starting in the next couple weeks. I think that they're not going to wait. I think that they're going to go out and try to be one of the first teams out there making a stab at a quarterback. So I'm not convinced they want to leave it up to the draft. I think Rivera wants to win right now, and I think their best opportunity to do that is going out and getting a guy like Russell Wilson. That's my number one candidate to come is Russell Wilson. I think you can sell him on, have Rivera and Gibbs sell him on being the next face of this rebrand, savior of the franchise if he comes in and wins us just a playoff game. Terry resigns immediately. You have Terry McLaurin. You can sell him on the offensive line because Russell Wilson's been one of the most sacked quarterbacks in the NFL over the course of his career. Washington's a bigger market, honestly, than Seattle when the team is winning. And it's a pipe dream, and I still think it's maybe like a 10% chance that it actually happens, but I think that there's a better chance that it happens than a lot of other people on Redskins Twitter or Washington Twitter, Washington Instagram that thinks that players just might not ever want to come here because of Dan Snyder. And I think that there's a lot more that goes into it. And when you put money and fame in front of people, it can be a really big motivating factor. So Washington has to go take that step at quarterback. We can't be trotting out Mitch Trubisky next year. We can't be trotting out Taylor Heinicke. We have to have somebody that's either a top-tier rookie or a top-tier free agent, or I'll be honest, I'm not going to believe in the direction of the team. So it's pivotal, and the time to compete is now.
I 100% agree. They need, I was saying this last season where go get Matt Stafford. I was huge on Matt Stafford on my account. I was pounding the table for him for weeks and weeks and weeks. And to find out that they had the second best offer that then got upsell by the Rams broke my heart. But they need to do that again. Just because you miss once doesn't mean you're going to miss again. You need to go out, and there are guys to be gotten this season. Russell Wilson's one of them. I mean, I would love if you offer him a giant contract and you offer him Seattle a lot of draft picks and you pitch Russell Wilson on the environment and opportunity he's walking into. Not to say Washington is staying on a championship roster, no, but I think most people would agree if Washington had a quarterback this year, we'd be looking at things a lot differently, and we'd probably be talking about a playoff game right now. So whoever that be, they need to land a big fish. And don't give me no Mitch Trubisky. Don't give me a Tyrod Taylor. Don't give me Taylor Heinicke again. Don't give me Kyle Allen. No disrespect to any of those guys as potential backup, but they need talent, and they need to bank on upside and potential here, not just who can get the job done. No more Ryan Fitzpatrick. No more stopgaps. Go get a quarterback. The rest will figure itself out.
I'm giving 2 firsts, a second, and Montez Sweat for Russell Wilson right now. I think that would get it done. But that's just total speculation. But I feel like that's a lot for a quarterback his age.
A record-breaking deal, and I think you can work with that. I mean, I'd trade Montez Sweat for and people were hesitant
immediately
in a Deshaun Watson deal last year. Not saying the team should go for Watson right now, especially with a lot that's going on with him still and allegations-wise. But just in terms of people, and obviously Montez Sweat, the perception of him right now is a bit different than it was last season and where Washington was with their defensive line. But you got to give somebody up, and James Smith-Williams and Casey Toohill, no, they're not stars, but, you can survive with both them at edge. And they did survive with both of them at edge. The defense played its best football with both those guys starting. So,
I mean, still have Chase Young, too, coming back. Don't forget.
Bottom line, Washington. Go get a damn quarterback.
Yeah, that's all it boils down to.
That concludes our 2021-2022 offseason. A bit of a disappointment from where expectations were coming into the season. Things seem a bit hectic, bit chaotic, a lot of question marks, and a huge offseason coming up for Washington right now. But there is reason for optimism. The team has players. The team has options. The team has resources to work with. But that will wrap it up for the 2021-2022 season as we go into a major offseason for the team. I'm Jess of HTTR.Nation on Instagram, and I will pass it off to Sam, who has some personal news to share about the future of the podcast.
Guys, while I have enjoyed, my 2 years here at Burgundy and Gold Review working with Jess and Spencer, I am saddened to say that this will be my last episode as co-host on the Burgundy and Gold Review. I will be branching off on my own as to provide a direct link to my Instagram account, WSH Football 365, and we'll be creating an all-new podcast. Still going to have Jess on every now and then. Everything's still good, but we're just going to go our separate directions and try to create 2 new concepts that will better coincide with our Instagram page and the direction that we're trying to go forward with that. But I wanted to thank everyone for listening to what we've gone through together in this roller coaster of a football team over the last 2 years. And I wanted to thank Justin Spencer for bringing me on and allowing my voice to be heard on these airwaves. So I've learned a lot, and I've had a lot of fun, and I will miss it. And I'm a little sad, if I'm being honest, but it's not the end. We'll all still be around on the interwebs, and it's just keep following my Instagram, WSH Football 365, and right around when the name changes, I'll be announcing my new endeavors. So again, thank you for giving me the time to talk, for listening to my voice, and helping me grow along with my friends here at the Burgundy and Gold Review. But that's all we have for you guys this time, and thank you so much for tuning in. For the last time, I'm Sam of WSH Football 365, and that was Jess of HTTR.Nation. Both can be found on the Instagram app. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to our YouTube and follow us on all places where podcasts can be streamed. Thanks again, and go whatever the name's going to be in a couple weeks.